Hey, it's good to see you guys, and I just wanted to give you a couple quick updates before we go into the topic of why exactly it's so difficult, especially in civil court, for indigent defendants to defend themselves. But for starters, so far we have managed to raise $650 out of the $10,000 we're looking to raise. And again, for those of you who have donated, I cannot thank you enough. It goes a long way, and already a great deal of stress has been relieved off of my shoulders. And I know there's probably more in the mail right now since we're doing things through snail mail. But thank you so much. And the other thing I wanted to cover really quickly, and then we'll get into the topic, is that on the third charge that I mentioned in the first video, I thought it was, even I'm confused over some of this stuff. I originally thought that it was a Virginia charge, which it is, but it's it's a general conspiracy charge. But the charge itself doesn't actually say what the conspiracy was. So essentially, I've been successfully held liable for conspiracy, but there's conspiracy to do what is kind of what's up in the air, and it's a very bizarre outcome, and as I've discussed. And if you haven't seen the first video that I did, I'd suggest you go back and watch it, and that'll help fill in some of the gaps. So that's that, and I guess now we can move on to the topic. There was a lot of things that many people who are trying to pay attention to the Sines versus Kessler case weren't able to keep up on or understand why it was so difficult for us to defend ourselves in these circumstances, especially when floating around the internet, it's very easy to just find how involved Antifa was, and even specific individuals who are well-known anti-white terrorists. Essentially, they're anarchists, they're communists. In some cases, they're democratic socialists. Either way, all of these people, the one thing that unites them is their hatred for white people. And so when they go out to commit violence, they're doing so largely in order to, attack white people. And that's terrorism. That is anti-white terrorism. And that's essentially what happened in Charlottesville, is these people came out to terrorize, to intimidate, and to cause chaos and havoc, and try to shut down a very legitimate rally with real concerns about the European heritage and the monuments being replaced. In fact, one of them, just to rub salt in our eyes, they've mentioned that they're going to be melting it down and turning into what is most certainly going to be a piece of anti-art, just a hideous monstrosity that's just going to be kind of spitting in our faces and rubbing our nose in it. And so these same people, came out to shut our rally down. But when it comes to litigating a case in trial, in the court system, you have to establish facts, and there's certain procedures and certain bars that have to be met in order to bring something in as evidence. So, for example, the night of the torchlit vigil on August 11th, there have been actually numerous anarcho-communists, anti-white terrorists who have long histories, even prior to Charlottesville, of committing violence. And in fact, in one case, one of the individuals was arrested in the early 2010s for conspiring to firebomb Barack Obama's campaign headquarters, and I think even I want to say Rahm Emanuel's house in Chicago. And he was charged for that. He was some of those charges were thrown out, but some of them were upheld, and he was convicted on some of those. Another individual had actually watched as his friend murdered someone and then helped this guy hide the body. I mean, these were the types of people who showed up the night at the rotunda of the Thomas Jefferson statue, the night of August 11th. Now, I can say that because it has been discovered by various journalists. However, that cannot be used in court because in order to establish those facts in court, we would have to have someone who knew these individuals come into court and testify and say, yes, that individual in the photo is the same person as, this individual who was charged for terrorism in Chicago, or this individual who spent time in prison for tampering with a murder victim. And so, those are only just two of the numerous, Antifa who showed up. In fact, other of these, anarcho-terrorists that showed up were among the individuals who went on to assault two Hispanic Marines in Philadelphia. And in fact, they're the ones who kicked off the fighting that night. Tom Keenan and Thomas Massey. I don't always remember the names of all of these people, but both of those individuals had long histories of violence, were at the January 20th inauguration riots during the Trump administration, and were even involved in attacking undercover cops they thought were white advocates, over a decade ago. So again, the people that showed up around the rotunda were not just students, and were not just the people that sued us. They were violent terrorists with long histories, and we can demonstrate this. However, establishing that in the court of law, we were very limited in what we can do, and a large part of the reason why we're limited is because we were largely indigent. We did not have the funding that the people suing us had. They've raised, I think, $15 or $20 million or something like that to launch this lawsuit, whereas I think probably the combined amount of money raised by the defendants was perhaps $150,000, maybe $200,000 combined. And that was just, for the most part, enough to pay attorney's fees and to pay for transcripts and stuff like that. Some of these transcripts are incredibly expensive when you have depositions, and there were so many defendants and plaintiffs. Each deposition for each of the plaintiffs and the defendants could range anywhere from like $800 to $1,200 a piece. And when you've got 20 or 30 people, that's a lot of money that adds up. And so we were at a huge disadvantage at this thing. It's that was one of the things, is because in order to, find someone who could testify to the fact that, Thomas Massey or Tom Keenan or any of these other individuals with long rap sheets and histories of terrorism were there, that would have required, a lot of money with like an investigator to try to figure out individuals who know these people, who are willing to come in court and testify. And that's another barrier in and of itself, is it's very difficult in civil court to force someone to testify who doesn't want to. And on top of that, just in general, it's always bad for the defense to bring in someone who doesn't want to testify. That can go very wrongly if someone just doesn't want to be there. And so it's very difficult when we were already facing a huge amount of pressure against us, and anyone who showed up to the rally was getting fired from their jobs. and harassed. Anyone tangentially associated with the alt-right at that time was being greatly persecuted. And so getting someone to want to come in and essentially testify in a way that would be helpful to, members of the alt-right, it just wasn't going to happen. And that's what made it so difficult for us to launch a defense in the first place, is some of those things that we had to establish in order to show a jury, look, the people that came out to this thing to start violence, these people do have long histories. They are well known. We had a very difficult time doing that. And I think we were actually able to show enough over time that we were able to somewhat establish that in a roundabout way. Although we weren't able to really just get into specifics and just show how like jaw-dropping. I mean, it really is when you start going through the anarcho-terrorists who are there. It's just jaw-dropping what these people have been charged for in the past prior to that event, and what many of them went on to do afterwards. So that was just one of many things. Another thing is that we did not have any like Antifa or left-wing terrorist experts who we could call upon to establish some of those facts as well. And there were some things we were able to do, again, to get around that, but it did make it very difficult to do. As of right now, there are very few people who could plausibly call themselves Antifa experts in the court of law. Perhaps Andy No might be one of those. I think there's one or two other individuals who have kind of made rounds around the conservative establishment, among the, interviews with the talking heads and saying, hey, I was, I used to be an Antifa member and this is what it's like. Those individuals too can be considered experts. The problem is that, again, none of them want to do anything to help white nationalists or white advocates. And so, again, that made it incredibly difficult. We did try to reach out to some of these people, but we got no replies in return. And so that's a very important thing to think about. We need people who are going to be experts on anarchist, communist, and anti-white terrorism if we're going to be able to defend ourselves ever in the future in the court of law. That needs to be something that happens. And so that was just another bar, another thing that was working against us. Again, we did find some ways to get around that. Most of the people on trial at this point in history are well aware of who Antifa is. And so we were able to get enough video in there where they could actually see these people, and they themselves who, already knew what a black and red flag was an Antifa flag, and the Antifa flag with the circle and the two flags in it. And in other cases, there were, the one thing that was easy for us to establish and point out was the iron hammer and sickle of the communist flag, and there were many of those there as well. So a lot of this stuff is just far more difficult than people would realize, and even myself, it's, with everything that's been going on and how much I've talked to lawyers, I'm still learning things about this whole process. And, in many ways, it is good that there's a high bar to establish facts. That's a good thing. But not in the sense of a civil case in which, in our country, in America, there is just, unfortunately, it's not like a criminal case. In fact, I saw somebody ask me that in one of the mentions. They said, are you not provided a public defender? And for civil court, there is no public defense. When you're being sued, you don't have the right to a public defender, and many people get really, really screwed that way because it is prohibitively expensive to litigate in defense of yourself. And even so, even if you are able to get enough money for an attorney, it still can be incredibly difficult to establish facts, especially when it comes to being a political dissident, where it's hard enough to even find an attorney to represent you, let alone try to get someone to come in and testify on your behalf, knowing that given that it would benefit you, that they very well could face the exact same terrorism that you yourself have faced, or they could lose their jobs, or it could cause problems with family members or friends. So it's a bit of a pickle, and it was very hard. Now, given all of that and everything that we were up against, we still managed to, like I said, for the most part, pull out pretty well. The plaintiffs did not successfully sue us. They did not succeed on the first two charges, were the accusations of racial intimidation or conspiracy to commit racial violence and intimidation. They didn't succeed on that. Even though they were able to use circumstantial evidence, they still failed to hold us liable. And that's because it was hogwash. It was bullshit. It was absolute horseshit, quite frankly. And the other charges, like I said, most of those were against Fields. The third charge against me is a very bizarre outcome. Again, watch the first video I did if you want to understand that. But those are just a handful of the difficulties we had with the Sines versus Kessler case. So that's that for this video. Again, thank you very much for everyone who's donated in the past. Again, we have reached $650. We're still aiming for 10,000. I'm sure there's some in the mail right now. But if you feel like donating to this is a good thing, I would greatly appreciate it. We're still going through post-trial motions. There will be appeals. And if all else fails, we're heading to bankruptcy court and fighting it there. We're not giving up. We're going to make these people fight for every inch. We're not going to be easy targets to be bullied by these corrupt attorneys from New York. That's not what we're going to allow happen. But we do need your help to keep fighting this thing. So again, there's going to be something on the screen right now. That's going to be the address to my attorney's office where you can send a check or money order. Make sure that you mark my name on the envelope. Otherwise, it won't get to me. So make sure you do that. And thank you so much for everything. I really appreciate it. And I will see you guys again. Bye.